สวยกว่า
นะงั้นให้เขายืนบนพรมแต่บอกบนพรมปริ่มๆไปทางด้านหลังหน่อย
อะไรนะ CM น่าจะ CM นะครับก็ผมเจใช่ครับ
ครับผมก็อีก2-3 วันนี้ขอไปแล้วผมที่สิ้นเดือนครับผมก็ให้ผมก็เพราะมันเยอะบริษัทใช่หม้อลงมาเราสุกไม่ทันแล้วเพราะมันต้องเดือดครับเอาแค่เดียวไม่เป็นไรค่ะขอเซ็นเตอร์ได้เลยนะครับแล้วก็จำงานครับเอาที่หมดดีครับยังเลยครับติดใส่สูงเลยครับยังไม่ได้ใส่เลยครับมันฝากไว้ก่อนใส่ได้ไหมเมื่อวานนี้คนสอบที่ได้มาเช้าตอนนี้เป็นเรียกกัน
ไม่ได้ยินค่ะโดยไม่ได้ยินค่ะพิมพ์เนี่ยได้ซีใช่ไหมคะจะสงสัยใช่ค่ะ
ครับผมขอบคุณขอบคุณ
มีอะไรทำเยอะมากสำหรับเวลาฟังของออสเตรเลียนี่จะชอบเพราะว่าจะมีแบบเป็นแล้วเราก็จะเอามันถ่ายได้เป็นหนึ่งที่เลยนะครับแค่2-3 เดือน
มันมีแบบขึ้นลงในตัวลงที่นี่ออกมาแล้วเห็นแล้วสิว่าเวลามันหายเนี่ยเงินเยอะเลยหายไปเลย
แล้วเราแต่ว่าไม่ได้เห็น
เอาไม่หาชื่อบริษัท
อันนี้ชื่อบริษัทหรือว่าชื่อคนTHA นี่อะไร
ใช่ค่ะ
พร้อมครับ1 2 3ขอบคุณครับ
อันที่สองคือว่าที่เราจะเดินเกี่ยวกับให้การเดินเกี่ยวกับมีหลักการและเราอยู่ในวิธี
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you here to Thailand CG Forum, Governance as a Driving Force for Business Sustainability, held by the Securities and Exchange Commission, Thai Institute of Directors, and the Stock Exchange of Thailand. My name is Sitnida Petwirakul, and I will be a master of ceremony in the event. This is a 3-day event, which today's forum is open for directors of Thai-listed companies, focusing on the board of directors' leadership, roles and performance by providing the insights to create awareness of good corporate governance as well as practical implementation. CG will therefore be the key driver towards business sustainability, and the activities of the next 2 days will be roundtable discussions, which is a closed session for invited delegates. In this regard, may I invite Mrs. Ketsara Manchusi, President of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, on stage for her welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming her on stage.
สวัสดีทุกคนนะคะ Dear Secretary General Security and Exchange Commission คุณระพีสุจริตกุล Dr. บัณฑิต นิษฐาวร President and CEO of Thai Institute of Directors and the governors of the Stock Exchange of Thailand and also the delegates of Thai and international both government and private sector organization, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, or we call the SET, the SET, I would like to welcome all of you to the Thailand CG Forum. This year, Thailand is honored to play host, and it's also very special that the Stock Exchange of Thailand the Security and Exchange Commission, Thai Institute of Directors, and OECD are jointly hosting this 3-day event for all of you here. The objective of this forum is to demonstrate, update, and exchange ideas on the current corporate governance, or we call the CG, developments in Thailand and Asia, as this region has been very committed, progress, and reach global CG standard. Today, at the panel discussion by the Thai and international CG experts, we are honored to have directors of the SET listed company attending. The activities of the next 2 days, October 29 and 30th, will be roundtable discussion from representatives of over 25 countries sharing CG experience and developments. Over the past decade, the concept of doing business has changed significantly from maximizing profit to shareholders to sustainable business for shareholder and stakeholder through value creation. Especially, the director's role has moved from passive approving body to actively leading. In addition, CG Essence has changed the focus from form to the substance. As such, the role and duty of the board of directors are more and more important. Business operations must be based on good governance and best practice. And today's session will focus on the board leadership, the board roles, and the board's performance to ensure that the directors truly understand and recognize their role under good corporate governance. Good corporate governance is like key success factor for the sustainability. And after the various sessions in this forum, I hope that you will gain more insights on governance as a driving force for business sustainability. I am confident that listed company directors and top management will greatly benefit from the panel discussion and could apply this substance to enhance your organizations. This so-called CG in substance, we can create transparencies and recognition from domestic and regional as well as global investors, becoming value added to the business and all stakeholders moving forward sustainability. Thank you very much.
Remain on the stage for the next session. And the next session is the panel discussion on sustainability of Thai listed companies, share visions of SEC and SET. May I invite Mr. Rapi Sucharit-Kun, Secretary General, the Securities and Exchange Commission, Thailand, on the stage. The session will be moderated by Dr. Bandit Nithawan, President and CEO, Thai Institute of Directors. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming all the panelists on the stage.
So, good morning and welcome to Thailand CG Forum. And welcome to the first session of today's event. And for those of you who have traveled a long way to join us here in Bangkok, so welcome to Bangkok as well. In this first session, I have the honor of speaking to the two persons who are the top regulators of our capital market, Kun Rapi Sucharit-Kun, Secretary General of the SEC, and Kun Gresala Manchusi, the President of the Stock Exchange of Thailand. I think in this first session, we like to hear the views of the two organizations, their common vision on the issues of sustainability of the Thai listed companies. But let me begin by asking Kun Rapi first on the first issues. You know, in the last 10 years or so, we have seen a lot of progress and changes in the performance of listed company in the context of corporate governance and also in the context of moving towards the goals of sustainability. As a regulator, are you satisfied with the progress that we have been making? And in the short term, what do you see as a key challenge and also the longer term issues that you like to see people paying more attention with? Maybe I can begin with you, Rupi.
ก็ตอนเช้านี่คงเป็นเสียงในฟิล์มนะฮะต้องพูดภาษาอังกฤษซะหน่อยหนึ่งเพราะเขาจะมีแขกภาษาอังกฤษอยู่ด้วย Good morning everybody. Thank you very much for having me here and having me start to reiterate some of my thoughts on these issues. To rephrase Dr. Bandit's questions of whether we've made significant progress in the past 15 years or not, the answer would be a resounding yes. I think we've made a lot of progress on the awareness. The IOD has been doing magnificent jobs of training all the directors who become the directors of the listed companies. And even now, as I understand it, most of the people who enroll into the IOD courses are not those in the listed companies, but those who are preparing to get into becoming a listed companies. And the issues that the IOD has consistently been preaching has been on this corporate governance. The implementation of the IOD principles, whereby the exchange has already published various guidelines and holding various seminars, it's another key issues, key stepping stones for us that we move forward. Things like corporate governance ratings, things like Board of the Year, various awards that are given out to all the participants. I think it's a hallmark of what we have really achieved within the past 15 or 20 years. And this cannot be done if it's not something that we don't have the scale to implement these programs. And as our capital market continues to grow, more companies get listed on the exchange, more people become a lot more aware of these issues. I think it's, the progress has been phenomenal. But having said that, when I first came into this position, 6 months ago now, one of the key questions has always bothered me quite a lot is that have we become a victim of our own success? Have we based so much on a lot of our effort on form ticking rather than having a corporate governance in substance? This is the issue that because I see the way people are preparing to get their mark, to get their ratings, but the key questions that really nags me is, are they being implemented in real substance? Does the whole concept of corporate governance being ingrained into the thinking of the board of directors, of the major shareholders who still perform a very active role in the companies on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a key question that we need to probably move ahead in trying to make a lot of success that we have achieved to be targeted at more on the substance side. The other question is that when I started asking myself is that we are doing a lot of this effort, the SEC, the SET, the IOD, put in huge effort in trying to promote these issues of corporate governance amongst the listed companies. But the key question always comes back is that why doesn't the listed companies themselves or the owner of the companies see the real benefit of corporate governance? Because a lot of what we are doing in whether all this regulation, all these guidelines, all these awards and everything, it's really for the benefit of the companies themselves. It's really not for us, but it's for their own benefit. Because if you believe that corporate governance is really a pathway to sustainability of the company, why don't you embrace it? That's been something that still it's a big challenge in terms of the Bandit. But I would like to relate a very small but very profound experience that I have had when I was acting as a facilitator at the IOD. One of the sessions, which was the role of the chairman that I facilitated on, I asked one of the chairmen of a company on this whole issue of the corporate governance things. His background was that he built his own company from scratch. He started off, as a small entrepreneur, grew up the companies, recruited a lot of people to come and work for him, and now he's become very, very successful. Companies in the stock exchange, and he's been kicked it upstairs, so to speak, to assume the role of the chairman. And I asked the question of him as to what does he think about the corporate governance? What is his idea? Does he think that it's good or it's bad? The question is very, very good. It's very profound. He said that, corporate governance is very good for the company, but it's very bad for the chairman. Okay. I asked him why is it very good for the company? He said because he built his own company from scratch. Everybody who works in his company was recruited by him since they were relatively young age, and they worked through the various stages together. Now they become very, the senior management. He recruited all his family to work in the company as well. So his son, his daughters, his nephews, and everybody works in the company, all bearing the same surname. And he said that as he grew older and older, his world became narrower and narrower. Because he had so much clout in the company itself, nobody dares to contradict him. Everybody just follows him. And he realized that if he continues that way, without really embracing the corporate governance of having outside directors coming in, without having people coming and questions and to act as a counterbalance to his patronage, this will not last long. There's a real risk and possibilities that he will make a wrong decision one day, and particularly on the strategic side. And if he makes that wrong decision, and if nobody dares to contradict him, that would be something that would destroy the long-term future of the company. So that's what he say, the corporate governance is very, very good for the company. Okay. And then I asked, why is so bad for the chairman? And he said, because now he as a chairman can no longer do what he wants. Okay. Everything has got to go through the various process. Everything has got to go through check and balance. But on balance, he values the sustainability of the company more than what he can do or he can't do. I think that's very, very profound. It's very simplistic. I don't want to talk about this whole concept of disclosures, the independent directors, accounting standards, God knows what, ASEAN scorecard or whatever. But I think if this is a big challenge, if we could instill this thinking into companies, I think it paves the way towards everything that we've been working on for the past 10 years. I think that's a key challenge, really. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have many chairmen here in the room, so I think you'll probably be sharing the same thoughts. I think it's more about changing the mindset and the behaviors of the roles of directors and also of the chairperson. Now let me turn to Kun Kesara. What would be your impression of what we have done in the last 10 years or so?
ค่ะสวัสดีทุกท่านนะคะก็จริงๆแล้วท่านเลขา summary ไปหมดแล้วนะคะแต่ว่าค่ะ Good morning everyone. I think คุณระพี has been summarized what we has been doing, and the next stage I totally agree with him that we are coming to the stage that what would be the substance of doing things. We could say that during the past over 10 years that the stock exchange of Thailand has been starting about this kind of CG, and because of we think that the corporate governance would be an essential step that for the listed company who solicit the public, who solicit the capital market, has to have that good corporate governance. Because we are talking to a lot of stakeholders and investors, this would be is a crucial step that we have to do. So when we start, I think back since what I got from my staff is in the 1994 that the stock exchange issued that the listed company has to have at least 2 independent directors, and we do supporting the IOD to establish both SEC and SCT to have the kind of all the directorship education, because we thought that the directors of the company would be the most important group to lead the company for the CG also and for other policy making. And we all have all kinds of education, all kinds of CG center in the past, and we also issue the guidelines and the practice to the listed company. And I think the one thing that we has been doing is, and we also have the experts sit at the front rows, starting from อาจารย์ฮิรันรุดีศรี คุณปกรณ์มาลากุล คุณยุทธวรชัดทาน who are the working committee who has been gone to see all the listed company and to introduce all the CGs, to explain to the chairman, to explain to the director about the importance of the CG. That's why we come to this level that if we can say that all the CG that we have been doing at the beginning, we have to say that all the listed company may not know how to do it. That's why we have to have the expert to recommend, to advise. We have to have the practice. We issue the practice. We issue the guidelines, and we also have the workshop. And we also have the assessment. The IOD has access all the listed company and give the stars. We can see that 3-star, 4-star, 5-star at the beginning level. And we also give all the award to the best or to the excellence corporate governance. But at this level, we can see that all these kind of statistics is we has been doing I think almost 10,000 people that attend to the workshop. We do all the assessment, and the assessment is I think already 12 years of doing this kind of things. But in this year, we are changing ourselves because I think for these over 10 years, we see that the corporate governance has been in place in most of our listed company. But what we're seeing, how could we do it better? How, if we for the next page, I think for the next page, we would see that if we compare to other exchanges among the ASEAN, we could say that because we has been start this kind of things for many years, we are running the first among the ASEAN, like ASEAN scorecard, all the CG laws, even the World Bank assessment. And the last one is on the DJSI. The DJSI is the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which we have about 13 companies that qualify for the index in this year. And this one has been much improved from the beginning that we got only one Siam Cement. And along about 4 to 5 years, we got 13 companies. But what we are seeing that I would say that I have two issues. One issue is we have quite a good fundamental of the corporate governance among the listed company. But we are seeing that the world is moving toward the sustainabilities. CG may not be enough. We have to concern about the environment. We have to concern about the social responsibilities, which actually we all in practice of doing things. But in terms of measurement, in terms of doing in the kind of more organized, we may not do it. So that's why the DJSI is a bit. It's just measure what or access what we has been doing. So for this year, we has been improve our CG report award into the SD, we call Sustainability Development Award, and this include the E and S. So we already have the governance. We include environment, social responsibility into the criteria. And we announced it that we got about 13 companies that qualify for the DJSI. But in Thailand, we do have a lot of listed companies who can comply with all the ESG criteria, but they are small. Because for DJSI, it's not only the ESG, it's also measure about the investable stocks, which is all over the world. They have about 2,500 stocks. So they have to big enough in terms of the liquidity. But for the Thai market, we got about 13 companies, which is much more higher number than other ASEAN market. But for the Thai market, we have another committee to look into the ESGs among the Thai company. This year we got another 38 company. So 38 plus 13 would be 51 company. We call the Thailand Sustainability Investment. We haven't done the index. We just put the list out. And what we're seeing that the listed company has been doing a lot of job. They have a lot of team. They have a lot of people to do it. But as a listed company, we need the investor to see that it's not what we do is not only for the company itself, for the staff, for the organization, and for being a good citizen in the society. But as a listed company, I think a part of our job would be for the investor side. So we have been promoting this kind of ESG stocks to the institutional investor. We need the institutional investor to look into this company because in the global arenas, we are seeing a very high growth of the intention about investing in the ESG or investing in a good corporate governance. We see a lot of demand from the institutional investor in the global business. So what we are doing would be that we are going to promote the ESGs to the listed company. But this one, for the Stock Exchange of Thailand, we are basing on the voluntarily basis. The listed company has to volunteer itself to join this program because I think that this one you need to do a lot of works too. You need to refine all the job that you already done. That's why it's a voluntarily basis, and also that we are promoting from the investor side, both the local and the foreign investor, to look into our ESG listed company. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the remarks are quite clear that both of the regulators are quite, I would not say happy, but satisfied with the current progress. But still, there are a lot of things that we can do. Khun Rupi mentioned about form versus substance. I think these are the key issues in our own assessment of companies. Companies are good at putting in policies, but we like to see more of the actual practices, to follow those policy. And the latest assessment of this year have shown that there have been more improvement on that front. The stock market have been focused more than on the issues of governance. I think they are looking further ahead to issues of sustainability because this is where the crux of the market interests are, including looking for Thai companies that can fulfill this mandate of the ESG as well as sustainability. And also congratulations, now we have 13 Thai companies that have been invited as member of the DJSI. But looking ahead, Khun Rupi, the roadmap of the SEC, both on moving corporate governance towards the issues of sustainability, I think this is quite a sort of a important and crucial direction that we are taking going forward. Can you perhaps share with us, the roadmap and the idea behind this policy drive?
Sorry, to come back on this, the issue of the corporate governance and substance, which I think it's really the foundation for everything. It's a foundation towards the social responsibilities as much as the management in the company itself. At the SEC, if you have had any recent contact with our staff, the buzzword at the SEC is now the ecosystems. in formulating our regulations, we are looking a lot closer into what is the ecosystem surrounding the various regulated persons. And having to understand that the ecosystems in which they operate, the key question is that is our regulation in the right place? Does our regulation put the weight into driving the intended outcome of what we would like to achieve? One example is in the context of the corporate governance has been that in the past we put a lot of pressure and regulatory framework on the role of independent directors and external auditors. Okay. We say that they have to be financial experts, they have to be financial literate, they have to be on the audit committee, they have to provide various opinions in the related parties transactions, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But then if you look at the profile of listed companies who are listed on our exchange, close to 65 or even close to 70% are actually family owned. So in effect, what it meant is that if you look at the structure of the board of directors, 7 out of 10 would be family. They would be, you have the same surname, they have they're either brothers, sisters, mother, or whatever it is, of the owners. And the independent directors only comprise of only 3 persons. How can the 3 persons change the mindset of the 7 people? It's going to be almost impossible. It's almost like you're trying to make use of a small cogwheel and having that small cogwheel trying to turn the bigger cogwheel. It's going to be impossible. The small cogwheel would then break somewhere, somehow. Okay. So the key strategies of our regulation in the next couple of years would be how to actually get the buy-in and the mindset of the major shareholders. I think that's a key thing to achieve what the example that I've given to you in my first round of presentation. And if you can do that, everything, I think it's going to be an easy piece of work, because once you have the buy-in from the management, everything just flows. Okay. On the social, corporate social responsibilities, again, if you look at the ecosystems of companies having to operate and having to fight for funding from investors, this is as much as you have to really look at the drive from investors as much as the drive within the company itself. We can see that the top 50, top 100 companies who have international exposures to foreign investors, who in turn are regulated by own governance and by their own shareholders and investors. These are the ecosystem whereby they're driving the corporate social responsibilities in the sense that the companies can't breach that, because if they breach it, the end investors would not be able to invest the money into those companies. We have recently seen the case of Volkswagen that was very heavily punished by investors, leaving them in drove. We have seen even Thai companies who engage in international export of food, and there was this issue that cropped up on the use of forced labor or not, and they had to defend and then try to go out and justify. Those are the top tier companies who are already being faced by the pressure from outside to conform on these corporate social responsibilities in process. Okay, so I have no worries about that. But what about the rest of the 500 companies, which is really exposed to Thai investors? How much and how far would Thai investors be prepared to say that if these companies adopt corporate social responsibilities in process, how would they be willing to say that, oh, because of the lesser profit margin, they are still willing to continue to invest in these companies? It's a huge test of our responsibilities as investors and of our responsibilities as community, whether we are willing to live by what we say is the right thing to do. I think this is a huge issue because people, particularly in the stock market, people tend to look at the bottom line now and not the bottom line within the next 5 years. Have a very short-term view. If a company missed their earnings for this quarter, the analyst would say that you missed the earnings, sell the stocks. Okay. And that would drive the valuation of the companies down. The management would be under the pressure to try to improve their profit margin. And how do you move away from the fact that you never done the corporate social responsibilities in process before? And to move it back into the operational companies, it's going to be a lot of costs being involved without corresponding short-term revenue increase, how the market would react to that. So I think that's really the key challenge. It's not just on the company itself, but it's in the ecosystems of our capital market, which I think we have to pay a lot of attention to.
Thank you. I think the key word this morning, judging from what we heard, is about the mindset, both of the owner of the company to appreciate the values of corporate governance, and also the investor himself that needs to look long term. So that we have both the demand side and the supply side of corporate governance in place. Now let's hear from the SET. What would be the current focus of policies?
Because I saw that several people, not he says, when we talk about the short-term result and the investor in Thailand may think about, I think we have both the short-term and but the short-term investor may distinguish or people snapshot to see only the short-term investor. But what the stock exchange has been doing and starting to do is because of we promote both sides as for the listed company that I said that this year we got about 38 companies beside the 13 companies. Those 38 include that even MAI stocks, a few of them in the list, and the small company under the set 100 that qualify in the list. What we have to do would be how to promote these company, these all company that this is the company who thinks about the corporate governance, the environment and the social responsibilities. And in another side, we are not only doing on the institutional investor, but as suggested from Kunrapis, that investor has to know how to value the company in a long-term perspective. That's why I think this is the stock exchange job, that how to make our investor to recognize the company has doing a good job. And I actually in the Western exchange, they already have the research that over the long term, the valuation of the company who got the ESG is not so bad. Actually, it's not a trade-off of the return, but over the long term of the period that we would see that this company produce a very good valuation. So we have to have a more history of this company, and we are going to do all the research to back up this kind of proposal. Thank you.
This session is designed for about half an hour. So I think we're almost there. And if there is any question from the audience, please feel free to ask. I think we still have a few more minutes. But I think many key issues have now been mentioned. I think the roles of the analysts also important, so that the analysts should not be focusing mainly on the quarterly results, but having a longer-term view.
Let me, because if you see the website of the stock exchange, and we have a kind of a brief 2-page out of fact sheets of the listed company on our website. Right now we have the star that issued by the IOD that who got how many stars on it. But we are going to put more on the ESG to give more information. But this one is just for information. We have to do more for the analyst and for the investor to acknowledge.
Thank you. Any of our colleagues want to? Yes, John. Maybe I can introduce you for the audience. John Lim is from the SID in Singapore, the Singapore Institute of Directors, and immediate past chairperson. Yes, we had the microphones coming. Yep.
I only have a very short question, but I want to congratulate both the SEC as well as Stock Exchange of Thailand and IOD Thailand for having done such a wonderful job. I think you are an example for many countries around here. I think you're talking about substance versus form and where you come from each step of the way. So I think you are fully deserving of congratulations. But my question is, after what Kun Rafi has talked about, convincing shareholders, especially major shareholders, can you share with us what are some of the strategies that you intend to use in terms of convincing, getting a buy-in from the shareholders? Because that's a universal problem we have in many jurisdictions. Thank you.
It's actually a very difficult question because my staff are actually scratching their heads at this precise moment that we are trying to lay out the 3 years plan. But the real strategy would be very simple actually. We need a real access. We need to identify them first. Okay, who are the real power? Who has the whole power? Who is the real controller? You can get through the various management, but if you don't get through the controller themselves, it's going to be very, very difficult. Once you identify the controllers themselves, then you have to think, we have to think of the strategies to put it through them without, talking about all these regulations. Because I don't think it's not the right approach to go out and talk about regulations, because we are effectively talking about substance. And I think it's, if we can convey examples, hopefully like the one that I related to you, it may have some effect. Because this, as you probably know more than I do, this whole buy-in of the corporate governance issues it takes time. It takes trust as well. I've talked to listed firms who are owned by the family, and they said, how could we trust these new independent directors who come in, who just got in, or even those who even work with them for the past 3 or 4 years, whatever. How could we trust them to give them position of the chairman? Because now it's a requirement the chairman has got to be separate from the management. It's our family that we built it. How dare someone come in and assume this very important role in driving the company forward? Okay, so it's like going back to my this morning example. It's like a short-term view and a long-term view, and a lot of it depends on the trust and the interplay between the management, the owners, and the directors that comes in as well. If the directors, the independent directors that comes in and sit on a board, can really act as a real professional and provide, the real insight, provide the buzzword now is the central ideas of driving the company forward. Then it's a two-way value in which in which would help to convince the shareholders, the owners, that this is of real value. But you have to break that circle slowly. It's not something as if you can parachute in new high-profile, very good reputation independent directors and say, oh, you should really embrace this person at your in the first year of sitting. There's no way of doing that. And it takes time for the new independent directors to really understand the ins and outs of the companies and the working relationship of the board and of the various members. So I think it's both ways. You know, we tended to focus a lot on the regulation, but I think that the real key issue is really the interplay between the independent directors and the owners, and whether the independent director can prove their worth in being on that board and help the company to shape its future. That would be the way really to foster this long-term process of learning and working hands in hands. I'm not sure whether that's I answer your questions or it's not a short-term questions. It's not a short-term answers. I can't provide that.
Thank you. Kesara, you want to add on this issue?
I agree that it's not short-term, but it's not only one way or two ways, but I think I have many issues like the independent directors. We have to produce enough number of professional independent directors. I think we still lack of it. And Dr. Bandit has been doing a lot of hard work in this regard. And also that the pressure from the investor side. I think the pressure from the investor side would be an effective force. The company has to listen to, because you are a listed company. So you need to listen to the investor. But how could we create enough investor to request on these issues?
Thank you. And I think I have to bring this to a close because we're supposed to end this by 9:45. So you probably agree with me that both of our regulators, they know what they're doing, and we are in good form, and they are on top of the issues. So let me thank both of you on behalf of the audience, and invite the audience also to give us two directors a big hand of appreciation. Thank you.
SEC and SET on the context of sustainability for Thai listed companies, I would like to bring you to the next session on growth companies, capital markets and corporate governance by Ms. Fiana Chuchtong, Senior Policy Analyst, Corporate Affairs Division from OECD. She has analyzed and compared corporate governance frameworks and practices around the world for 17 years, and she also develops policy recommendations and advice to support reforms in Asia. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Fiana on the stage.
Sawadika. It's a real pleasure to be back in Bangkok after a very long time. I was last here in 2006. Thank you very much to the Stock Exchange of Thailand, the Securities Commission of Thailand, the Institute of Directors of Thailand for hosting this fantastic gathering of so many of you. Most of the time we speak with government institutions and agencies, so it's a real pleasure to speak to so many of you from the private sector, from the companies, from the boards, and hopefully some investors in the room as well. We heard earlier in the session, good corporate governance is not an end in itself. It is a means to create market confidence and business integrity, which in turn is essential for companies that need access to equity capital for long-term and sustainable investment. Access to equity capital is particularly important for future-oriented growth companies and to balance any increase in leveraging. You'll hear tomorrow in great length about the new and updated G20 OECD principles of corporate governance. They were just endorsed by the ministers of finance in September in Turkey, and they provide a very timely and tangible contribution to the G20 priority, which is to support investment as a powerful driver of growth. And growth is what everybody wants these days. Today, millions of households around the world have their savings in the stock markets, directly or indirectly. And it's quite a staggering number. Publicly listed companies provide more than 200 million jobs. And jobs is what everybody wants today as well. So the principles address the rights of these stakeholders and their ability to participate in corporate wealth creation. What I will actually present to you today is one of the main substantive contributions of the OECD to the G20, which was a report provided to the G20 ministers in September called Growth Companies, Access to Capital Markets, and Corporate Governance, because as was said earlier, corporate governance is not just an end to itself. So I will share with you this paper, which was actually drafted by our head of division, Mats Isaacson, who some of you will meet tomorrow. He's flying in tonight. So it's a great honor for me to present his paper. So if you have any difficult questions, they will have to be answered by him. The report, which was presented to the G20, is actually something very fresh, very new, and brings together a lot of work that was done by my colleagues over a number of years. The report is about the relationship between corporate governance and corporate access to capital markets. I think that's an important relationship that we sometimes forget. The focus is on growth companies that have the potential to escape a static state of being a small or medium-sized enterprise. Based on company-level data, the report provides an extensive empirical overview of how corporations enter and use public equity markets and corporate bond markets. It looks at the functioning of these markets, the investors that use them, we were talking earlier about the investors, and the companies that provide them with services such as credit ratings. From the perspective of growth companies, shortcomings and initiatives for improvements are identified and discussed. Growth companies play a huge and critical role for economic development, not least for economies that want to advance along the global value chains, like Thailand and other emerging markets, where self-employment and SME employment is only a second best solution in the absence of larger companies that are more innovative, more productive, and provide better paid jobs. But growth requires investment, and long-term investment requires patient capital. It is therefore essential that companies have the potential to grasp these commercial opportunities of scale and scope, so to access the equity capital. The reason is that compared to other forms of funding, equity capital allows companies to undertake forward-looking investments with uncertain outcomes, intangible or intangible assets, such as research, development, and innovation. In order to access public equity markets, corporations need to meet investor expectations with respect to corporate governance practices. They need to establish a formal structure of procedures, rights, and responsibilities that give investors trust and confidence that they would be willing to provide money and make the original owners willing to share ownership with a new circle of outsiders, as we heard earlier. So the principles of corporate governance provide the elements of such a framework. They also provide guidance to policymakers and regulators and how to assess, design, and improve corporate governance-related laws and regulations. Using data from more than 150,000 individual transactions, this is the work my colleagues have been doing over a few years, the report provides an overview of how corporations have used public equity markets and corporate bond markets. In emerging markets, there is a marked increase in the number of companies that use public equity markets for the first time through initial public offerings. Since 2008, about half of all equity capital has been raised through IPOs worldwide, was raised by companies in emerging markets. With respect to corporate governance, a large portion of these new publicly traded companies have a rather concentrated ownership structure with a dominant owner. In fact, when I started working at the OECD on corporate governance more than 17 years ago, we were often criticized for our outlook, which was sort of dispersed ownership oriented. That has radically changed, I can assure you of that, over the years, where we see that most of companies in the world are, in fact, controlled by controlled owners. In advanced economies, there are two major trends with respect to IPOs. First, there is a successive decrease in the number of new companies that use public equity markets as a source of funding. Between 2008 and 2014, there were on average 432 companies per year entering the stock market for the first time. compared to essentially 3 times that in the period in 94 to 2000, and 853 companies between 2001 and 2007. The other trend is that companies that actually use public stock markets tend to be larger than they used to be. And these trends have raised concerns about growth companies' access to public equity markets. So the report discusses a number of factors that may explain this development. These include an increase in regulatory and compliance costs related to stock exchange listing, which is why we really value the Thailand Stock Exchange's questioning about what is the right balance, the investment behavior and incentives of institutional investors and other capital market intermediaries, such as market makers, as well as changes in the business models of the stock exchanges themselves. The report shows that entering public stock market is not only important with respect to equity capital that companies can raise at the time of IPOs, because in fact, after about 4 years of entering the stock market, 37% of smaller growth companies raised additional equity capital through secondary public offerings. So entering the stock market and establishing a formal corporate government structure also increases the opportunities to tap other sources of capital, including corporate bond markets. The report illustrates the importance of good corporate governance for access to capital and greater financial flexibility. As I mentioned, this is particularly important for forward-looking growth companies that need long-term investments that sometimes have uncertain outcomes. So I'll just go through. In market economies, the business corporation is a key engine for development and economic growth. Not only do societies rely on companies for everyday supply of goods and services, but through investments in research, innovation, human resources, and fixed capital, corporations contribute to address long-term global challenges in areas such as clean energy, public health, improving the quality of life for people around the world. So it's not just about the bottom line, as you mentioned this morning. Of particular interest for economic development are these growth companies. And these are companies that escape a static state of being small or medium size. Instead, they manage to realize their full potential by grasping commercial opportunities. The definitions will vary of the growth companies, but providing an economic environment that supports growth companies is a key policy priority for long-term and economy-wide benefits, particularly for countries that want to advance along the global value chains, as I mentioned earlier. So an important condition for these companies is the access to capital and investment in tangible and intangible companies. The capital that corporations use differs in a number of ways. Some kinds of capital are sustainable for short-term or suitable for short-term use, and some can be used for longer and more uncertain undertakings. Of particular importance for long-term investment and growth is equity capital. The reason is that equity has some distinct characteristics that give it a special role as a source of financing compared to other forms of external finance, such as bank loans or trade credit. First of all, an injection of equity capital is eternal. Once it is provided, it cannot be withdrawn by the individual capital provider, the shareholder. This is obviously in sharp contrast to temporary capital injections, for example, bank loans, which in emerging markets have an average maturity of 2.8 years. After that, the borrower must be ready to pay back the loan. Second, equity capital is patient in the sense that any fixed interest or given rate of return is not guaranteed. The providers of equity will pay only after all the other stakeholders, such as employees, suppliers, tax authorities, and creditors, have been paid. This means that among capital providers, the equity owners will be the first to assume the cost if a business venture goes wrong. Third, since equity only receives the residual profits, equity capital is typically more risk-willing than other forms of external capital. This characteristic is particularly important for future-oriented companies where the outcome of research, innovation, product development, and market entry is uncertain, and the willingness to take a risk is important. So this eternal, patient, risk-willing nature of equity capital means that supply and access to equity capital is not only of importance to the individual company. The existence of enough equity capital is a systemic issue and of systemic importance. And that's why the structure and long-term dynamics of an economy's business sector are so important. Last but not least, access to a functioning equity market can only allow founders and early supporters of growth companies, such as venture capital firms, to turn their initial investment in the company into cash. Without this possibility to exit, financiers and employees of smaller growth companies may be less willing to lock in their money and time during the critical growth period of a company. The money they receive through the exit may sometimes be used to start up new companies or invest in other existing businesses. Obviously, they can also sell the enterprise directly to an existing larger company. And as a matter of fact, large firms continue